panel will be focusing on how sustainable development can pave the way for balancing economic development and nature conservation as the whole continent develops. Let's introduce the speakers for this discussion. It's Dr. Shadrack Kamenya has been working with the Jane Goodall Institute, Tanzania, since 1997. He has diverse knowledge in wildlife behavior, ecology, conservation, and climate change. Kevin Lunzalu is the co-founder of Kenyan Youth Biodiversity Network. He is an ocean ecologist and conservationist leader from Kenya with a deep interest in fostering youth-focused, inclusive, and rights natural resource governance. Olumide Idowu is the co-founder of the International Climate Change Development Initiative, a non-governmental organization that aims to produce a climate-smart generation throughout Africa while also tackling development disparities. Abimbola Abikoye is the founder of ReVamp Rave network in Nigeria. Abimbola is the founder of ReVamp, where she's rethinking with a diverse team towards climate education for young people and environmental advocacy for coastal communities to enable them for more climate action in their locality. The panel is, of course, moderated by Mngadi, a social ecologist, South Africa. Nonhle is driven to affect positive change in the society and has a passion for working with people, particularly in disadvantaged rural communities. She is a social ecologist at Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife, South Africa. My apologies if I've not pronounced your names correctly. I do really apologize for that. I'll just like to repeat the house rules to please everyone to keep your audios on mute and videos turned off. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section below. Over to you, Nonhle. You can begin the session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Greetings. Welcome to this panel. I'm so excited about this session. I am Mngadi. Also, I was having such a struggle trying to read the name, so I'm glad I've had someone before me murdering our names so that I also am not put to crime for doing that. But thank you so much for this opportunity. And before we start, I just wanted to express my gratitude of how excited I am that we get such platforms which bring Africa together, to discuss such critical issues. And for me, as a social ecologist, I think the biggest thing is that we already see how Africa as a whole is struggling, with providing livelihoods, and the dependence on natural resources will now be even in a worse state with climate change. So us getting into topics of how do we prevent this, how we work, to make sure that we mitigate what climate change can come to is like, I'm excited to be in this space. So without wasting further time, I will start with my first speaker. Please, can we just make this open? It's discussion. It's a way of us just moving forward. We are sharing knowledge. So just relax and just be calm and just be with the mindset of that we are working together for the better of Africa. So I will bring Mr. Shadrack. Here we go. I'm coming with the surname. Kamenya. Please take the floor for your first presentation. Thank you so much. Is Mr. Shadrack with us? Dr. Shadrack, that is, also. I saw him just now.
Yeah, I'm there. Hello. Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Can you please turn your video on so we can be able to see you?
Nonhle, I'd just like to say that Shadrack is not here. He was here right now, but I think there might be some network issue. He has come, I believe. My team.
No, he has just responded. Now. He is here. I can see his name on the screen.
Yeah,
I'm there.
I think he's here.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes, you can take the floor, sir. It's up to you.
Yeah. Okay. As you have heard, my name, and I work in Tanzania, and I'm working in Western Tanzania. And given the discussion we have today on how Africa can participate in reducing the climate change crisis, let me just explain in few words what we are doing in Western Tanzania. In Tanzania, Western Tanzania is one of the areas that we continue to have the forest. It has the natural forest still compared to other areas in Tanzania. But given the experience we see deforestation taking place faster than one can imagine. But also in the whole nation in Tanzania, we lose about 400,000 to close to 500,000 hectares a year. And I know this is not exception. I know there are other African countries that are experiencing the same. And in losing such magnitude of forest, I know the biodiversity also goes with it. So that is a challenge to most of African states. And me working with the Jane Goodall Institute, we have a number of efforts that we do. Some of them are dealing with the forest protection, but working with the government, conducting land
I think there might be some network issue at his end. Only you're on mute.
I think you are muted, Dr. Shadrack. You've been muted for a while now. You've been talking yourself.
Okay.
Can the host
Sorry.
please keep me unmuted so that I can be able to control if there's a situation where I need to talk? Thank you. You can continue, sir.
Okay, so among the things we are doing, so we are doing village land use plans as well as district land use plan, so as to conserve the forest. I know these are expensive efforts, but luckily we have funding from
we have lost you again. Okay. So maybe, Kevin, can I please pull you in here? Let's just give Dr. Shadrack a chance maybe to gather his network and try understand how better he can connect with us. Can you become the speaker that can present right now? And then also, I think I see a familiar, were you at APAC? I think I've seen your face around. Yes?
Yeah, I've been in a lot of places, so chances are you saw me at APAC. Good to see you.
I see you making waves in all the critical spaces. Good to see you as well. Dr. Shadrack, I'm trying to give you a chance maybe to better understand your connection. So I'm going to move to Kevin and then come back to you. Is that okay with you? Because we keep having difficulties. I don't know if you're having network issues or would you like to continue because I see you back?
Yeah, I think I would love to continue a bit,
okay,
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Let me say briefly what needs to be done for saving the continent of Africa. One is we have to make sure that the forests that remain needs to be protected. That's one, but also we have to opt for green energy. Because we have solar in plenty. We have the potential for solar in Africa, and that can help us a lot. And there are places where we have hydroelectric potential that also has to be utilized. But we can do all we can to make sure that the forests that we have protected, that will help us from sequestrating carbon dioxide, and as well as supporting the communities. But we know green energy is not developed in Africa, so I think the nations of Africa have to make sure that green energy, using solar, using hydroelectric power where possible, using wind energy, all these can help our continent. And I know that for domestic energy, most people in Africa are using firewood and charcoal. This is also very bad because they contribute to emission of greenhouse gases. So we have to make sure that we improve electricity even into villages, into many villages. Not only that, making that electricity very, very lower the price so that many
you are on mute again. You were speaking about lowering the price of electricity. That please take us from there. But you're on mute. Please unmute yourself. You're on mute. Okay, we have lost him again. Okay, so I liked how he. I'm just gonna speak as we wait for him because I think we guys just gonna keep having challenges. I like how he spoke about improving electricity, and in South Africa right now we are struggling with electricity. We are actually on load shedding even in present. And another thing, lowering the prices, you find that the main contributor is that most of our citizens have not been able to, pay for that electricity. So I'm interested. I was interested to know about this green energy and using wind, solar, because I feel like depending on electricity alone has not proven to be, the wisest thing going on right now in South Africa because we are struggling. But Shadrack, are you back? Still don't have him. I'm tempted to move on to my next speaker, and then he can just engage in conversations that we're gonna have at the end and add on points. Are you back, sir? No. Okay, I'm gonna take this decision. Kevin, I'm gonna bring it to you. I'm gonna bring it to you. And then please, can you take us through your talk? And I apologize, what could we be like? This is what technology does. This is why we need to go back to person. I was like, the first thing I asked, is this in person? And I heard it was on Zoom, like, no, not another Zoom engagement, because this is bound to happen all the time. So I'm hoping next year, we are going to be looking for that funding to meet live somewhere in one of the beautiful African countries. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you so much. I'll start with the obvious. Can you guys hear me? Are you guys able to hear me? Okay, great. So my name is Kevin Lunzalu. I coordinate the Kenyan chapter of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, the Kenyan Youth Biodiversity Network. And I am a marine ecologist, I'm working on marine pollution here in Kenya. I'm studying the impact of marine pollution on nesting patterns of sea turtles. Thank you so much to We Naturalists for having this amazing session and for providing us with a platform where we are discussing how Africa, the continent that we all love, can play a big role in fighting the climate crisis. So I'll start by saying that we are a continent that's privileged compared to all the other continents that exist on the planet. We are privileged to be the only continent that is at a position where the decisions that it will make will determine how much of the climate crisis it faces. In other words, Africa is uniquely positioned to either avert the climate crisis or be on the receiving end. And I understand that right now we are already on the receiving end, but as a country that's deeply endowed with nature, and study shows that 33 or 30-something% of the climate crisis solutions are actually in nature. So we can use the endowment that we have to avert the crisis. So that is the first low-hanging fruit that we have. And then I really like what the previous speaker said about energy. Not just the choice of energy, but access to energy. Because some things like deforestation, as we say, are happening at a very big rate because of lack of access to energy. And so as we develop, as we explore our sources of energy, we also need to ensure that communities have access to affordable and greener sources of energy. Another thing that we need to do as a continent is to de-silo conversations around climate change. I understand that by now the discussion is so siloed, and there are things that are happening in one corner of the conversation that are not heard in the other corner. Very new things are coming up. We're hearing things like net zero. We're hearing things like nature-based solution, climate mitigation, climate adaptation. And so all these concepts, unfortunately, are having people siloed. So we have groups that are working on climate mitigation, so groups that are concentrating on climate adaptation. They are the net zero people. We have the nature-based solutions people. Everybody is kind of siloed, and you have to take a side. So it's time to bring all these things that are related to climate under one roof and say, we're just talking about the same thing, just from different angles of our mouth. And so once we understand that these things need to be tackled collectively, then we can start collectively advocating for solutions that address these things. And this is the same problem that I have with the policy negotiations. Because for this year, for example, there is the climate COP, which is happening here in Africa, in Egypt, and there's also the biodiversity COP. Now, research has over time shown that there is a very strong correlation between climate change and biodiversity. I understand that the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which is going to be like the center of the discussion of the biodiversity COP, has a target on climate change. But this discussion around the correlation of biodiversity and climate change should happen on a regular basis and under the same roof. We don't necessarily need to meet in Montreal to discuss how climate change is affecting biodiversity, while on the other hand, meet in Egypt again to discuss how we can bring in nature-based solutions to tackle climate change. So we're talking about the same things, but in two different rooms and two different continents, and forming two different frameworks, because after these COPs have happened, the next stage will be the implementation. So you can imagine that the biodiversity people will be implementing their post-2020 framework, tackling their target 8, which is on climate change. The climate people will also be implementing the outcomes of the COP27. And some of that is based on nature-based solutions. So you realize that these are decisions that were made in two separate houses, but when it comes to implementation, they're basically the same things. So we need to harmonize the way we arrive at some of these decisions, because then this also provides for a seamless process in terms of even the capacity, when you're talking about capacity building, when you're talking about education that should go into it, when you're talking about resources like finances, the climate people are resource mobilizing separately for climate change. The biodiversity people also resource mobilizing separately for climate change. If we pull these resources together and say, these are going to tackle climate crisis in Africa, you realize that we will have a bigger impact. We will make more people, especially young people who make over 70% of the population of this continent, to be more engaged as opposed to like having these discussions happening in silos. Another thing that I would like to stress on is the aspect of regional collaboration. We realize that countries are affected differently with climate change. We have countries that are battling with droughts. For example, here in Kenya, about 4 million people are facing drought-induced starvation. The countries that are battling pollution, like our coast, and we have countries that are battling, let's say, hurricanes and this kind of other climate manifestations. So we need to bring these people together to see how do we then formulate solutions that address these challenges. Because the resources that go into these solutions are from the same body. I mean, when Africa is advocating for loss and damage, which is basically a term for countries that are polluting more, giving into the money to compensate countries that are being affected more by the climate crisis. When we are advocating for that, we talk as a unit. But when it comes to now implementing, when it comes to like how exactly are the modalities that go into this, you realize that we tend to work in silos. So we need to, as we collectively bargain for loss and damage, we also need to realize that these issues are cross-cutting and we need regional collaboration. For example, the issue of marine pollution, which is also a climate issue, because plastics, for example, are a byproduct of the fossil fuel industry. So it means that countries that share the coastline, like for example, Kenya and Tanzania, are basically sharing pollution as well. They're sharing, plastics can move from Kenya to Tanzania and vice versa. So it means that when we're setting up laws that cap plastic pollution, it doesn't necessarily make sense if one country bans plastics and all the other countries surrounding it are still producing and manufacturing the same plastics, because we still have feeling. A research that was recently done here in Kenya showed that about 36% of the plastics that come to the Kenyan coast are actually from foreign plastics, as they call it, meaning they come from other countries that surround the country. So it means that when we are dealing with regional policies that tackle plastic pollution as a manifestation of climate change, we need to come together as a region and say, hey, we are suffering from this climate crisis together. We need to put in regional policies, like an East African regional ban on plastics, for example. And so that is what I wanted to say for now, without wasting the space for other exciting speakers that will come in after me. And I'm happy to add to that later. Thank you.
Nonhle, I'd just like to interject. Olumide actually has to be there, so if you could maybe speak to him, it's been told. Yeah.
Okay, then he can definitely take the floor. There are certain points that I wanted to speak to that you mentioned, Kevin, but like let me open the space for the other speaker as he's in emergency, so that we can get his input also. But I've noted very interesting things that you spoke about that I want to further engage, but I'll hold them for now. You can take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, so I don't know what do you want me to make comment on?
No, sorry, I was referring to Kevin. You can take us through your talk as you had planned to do so.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Which of the part of the conversation am I speaking to?
No, you're just coming with your own thoughts in regards to the panel discussion that we are speaking about, ways in how we could prevent the crisis of climate change in Africa. So we are just in the introduction of it, and then we are just coming to, getting your side of it, and then at the end we're going to come and collaborate in the different knowledge that we've shared as an individual.
Right. I think he can just talk about the role Africa can play in preventing the climate crisis. I mean, basically, we love to hear that.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak. And sorry about, I have a lot of conflict of meetings, so I just have to make sure that I meet every other conversation. So like what my other colleague have mentioned, my brother talks about a lot of things that we need to be looking at. For me, the issue of climate crisis is let me call it, is an urgent action for both young people, women, children, everybody across the value chain. And I think it has started eating deep into the activities that we see ourselves as a country or as a nation and as an Africa.
We are losing you there. I think your network connection is getting bad. No, I think he is. I think he's gone. I'm gonna try pronounce your name. Abimbola. Please don't murder me.
No problem, it's fine. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Please help me pronounce your name. How do you pronounce it right?
Okay, so it's Abimbola. So you tried.
Oh, okay. He's back. So I'm gonna go. Can you bear with me? I'm gonna go back with him. I saw him raising his hand. That means his network is back.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This network issue had to be within my session. Like,
yeah, I'm very sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
No problem. I can hear you now.
So what I just want to try to say is, to solve the issue of climate crisis in Africa, I think I will mention three things. Number one, what is the role of our head of states in making sure that they translate the issue of climate finance, they translate the issue of climate adaptation and mitigation into the activities of the nation. So for instance, how do we start talking about climate finance when we have abundant resources in Africa? Why can't we maximize the opportunity of our resources in Africa than waiting for money to come from anywhere? Because climate finance now looks like one of the things that driven activities and implementation across Africa. But on the African continent, understood the importance of our natural resources, they will be able to solve 70% of our climate issues. Is it flooding? Is it Edasme that is going on? Is it a lot of activities of wildfire? So all these activities, is it the issue of ending gas flaring or fossil fuel? There are a lot of things that we need to start looking at. And the second one is technology. In Africa, where we can say some countries are now, tapping into technology transfer. They're tapping into using technology to solve climate issues. But how many countries can sustain the technology that they are bringing into their country? I'm not saying technology is bad, but I'm trying to say that we need to get ready. We need to be ready mentally, physically, to be able to solve the climate crisis ourselves. We keep saying that the developed country are the one polluting. Do you know how much pollution that we as a continent, we are putting out in our own living space as well? So we need to start looking at how can we take responsibility so that the issue of climate crisis will not be issue of waiting for the international people to solve our problem, but rather using our local resources to drive sustainable solution. I will not call it permanent solution, but sustainable solution that will make us to understand that there's process in implementation. Then lastly, how are we maximizing the power of young people to drive sustainable innovation? We have a lot of innovations across Africa that can speak to the crisis we are facing. We have a lot of innovations that can make the government more accountable and transparent in implementing actions across Africa. So until the government realize, or until people realize that climate crisis is a crisis that we need to solve as an individual and as a people of Africa, then we will now start seeing changes rather than waiting for the government to make the solution work for us. And I'll end by saying that any problem, anything for us, without us, it is not meant for us. So if you are making a solution for us and we are not part of the process, we are not part of the implementation, then those solutions are not for people that you are making it for. So it is high time we start looking at climate crisis in a bigger form, in a bigger way, to make sure that our leaders need to take responsibility. Individually, we need to look at actions, how we are also contributing to the impact of climate change in the community. Then thirdly, how we can maximize the power of young people, private sector, social enterprise, to see how we solve the issue of environmental issues. So I think with this, we will be able to drive innovation that will make our leaders understand that we don't need to wait for funding. We don't need to wait for money from somewhere before we drive innovation or drive changes within our continent, because Africa is blessed. Africa is one of the country that is with abundant solution and abundant resources that can solve our climate crisis. Thank you so much. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I hope that this conversation will get us to get some recommendation for the solution we are looking at when it comes to climate crisis for Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I love that community, bringing it back to the people came out of your talk, because yesterday I was attending this session and this man stood up and said, maybe we are giving too much power to the government to drive solutions to our issue, while the power of government is within us people. So my question then becomes, how are the community feelings about climate change? Is there something that they're accepting? Is there something that they see as a reality? And then how are we then as community people, not people on power, reacting to it? What are we doing? So those are becoming my questions as I hear you speak. And I heard Kevin speak a lot about collaboration and working. For instance, I remember in Rwanda, I was recently in Rwanda, I was so impressed by how the area that the country doesn't use plastic. And then I came back and I'm like, okay, I'm coming back, I'm going to share this information in South Africa. And then as soon as I shared it, and then I had someone say, oh no, but will that not lead to more plantation of trees and then deforestation, and then that impact the environment? I'm just like, okay, you know what? We just need to speak more about these things, because I feel like we are not speaking more, and these are the platforms that will help us to speak more. So I'm very grateful for this platform. So, but without also, Kevin, please note this question. I heard you say like 70% of the people, the population is youth. Are they connected to the issues? I mean, how do we get them to be connected? Because I know in the areas that I work, youth is definitely disconnected in environmental issues, particularly in climate issues. So how do we work to getting them connected to make the noise that's needed for the government? As Olumide says, that the government needs to be strategic. Okay, so I'm coming back to you. Okay, I'm coming back to you. Abimbola, I'm back at you again. Please forgive me again for murdering your name. Also, these are the things that we need in Africa, to be able to know how to speak each other's languages. It's such an embarrassment that I can't even pronounce your name, but we are getting there. We are the generation that's striving to make this continent a continent of beauty and one. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, so concerning the role that Africans play in fighting climate crisis, I would just like to come from 4 different aspects. And I'm going to be using some of the resources and natural resources that we have at the African continent to help explain the role that we play, the role we should play, and how we can improve on existing structures to ensure that some of the solutions that we bring about are able to help further solve climate crises at the African region. So we all know that Africa is one of the has one of the largest population, as well as we saw natural resources on Earth. And I would like to come from the area of having the Sahel, which we know we have the Lake Chad, which is bordered around 4 nations: Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, as well as having some of the largest coastal nations in Africa. We have 38 from the 16 land block states that we have. And so we understand that in terms of natural resources from the ocean, in terms of feeding, in terms of food and development, the ocean provides us with that. And also the means to trade as well. And also we also have the Congo Basin, which serves as the African Amazon forest that helps us with carbon and to reduce carbon emission and help the diversity of our continent in terms of wildlife and other natural resources that we can find in terms of forest and landscape conservation. And so, but the many activities that we've been, in terms of some of the decisions that we've made at leadership level, the policies that we've been able to create, the kind of partnerships and international collaborations that we've been able to engage in, and particularly coming down to community and citizen level, we know that there are some activities that we've been engaging, industries as well as citizens alike, have been causing so many degradations. And this is to say that there are a whole lot more advantages to the disadvantages that we currently face in terms of plastic pollution in our ocean, and in terms of deforestation for urban expansion, unsustainable urban designs, and also the technological advancement in terms of having multiple cars contributing to carbon emission, to mention a few. So I would say that a nation, I don't know if anyone has heard that a nation is considered powerful by its size, its military, its resources, and its human capital. And like I said earlier, Africa has the largest human resource in terms of the population size. And so this is a resource for us in terms of curbing climate crisis. And how do we do that? We know that many African countries are coming up with lots of innovative ideas in terms of transitioning from transitioning into green and renewable, clean and renewable energy. If you check out the likes of Morocco, which has instead of 52% reducing, ensuring that its country upskill its renewable energy commitment or ambition to 52%, and it's working on it. Also South Africa, in terms of establishing the carbon tax law or carbon tax act, to help it curb, to help transition itself into renewable energy by 32%, and also Nigeria in ambition to ensure that both grid-based is able to transition into renewable energy, and other countries are coming up with different innovations to ensure that these we transition into clean energy to help mitigate the impact of climate crisis, which we know that the African continent contributes less than 40% of the global total emission, right? And so I would like to say that aside from that, we have lots of coming into expanding forest landscape in terms of protecting wildlife. We know that if you check these East African countries, you see that we have lots of wildlife in terms of elephants, in terms of rhinos, in terms of pangolins, and many of them are being endangered, but we all know that they have some specific role they play in helping the ecosystem. And also sustainable food systems and agriculture. Africa is like the bird has a lot of landmass where there are a lot of arable lands. Well, there's lessened tree covers, but then we see some innovations. Citing example is an organization that I've been following so closely for the past 2 years called Just Dig It. They're adopting community-based practices to enhance forestry and conservation methods. And you see them in Kenya, most prominently Mozambique and the like. And you see that they've been able to restore like lots and lots of, a lot of acres of land in terms of conservation method. And so coming into Nigeria here, there are a lot of initiatives that have been coming up by some impeccable organizations or some renowned organizations, such as the Nigerian Innovation Center, which helps to fund lots of renewable ideas to ensure that the country meets its NDC targets in actualizing the Paris Agreement, which is the party to. And there are a lot of other innovations, and Africa, by its size, by its resources, by its strategic position on the continent, is an advantage in reducing the climate crisis. But then, in doing all of this, or reducing the impact that some of the activities we have in terms of trade, in terms of giving, in terms of the oil and gas sector and its partnership with other countries, other continents, and other corporations, you would see that there are lots to be done in terms of bringing innovations. And in this context, I like to say this, that it's not just about partnership and collaboration. It's about equitable partnership and collaboration, understanding that each continent on the same level, we have we have our different resources, and these resources can help us. And I think that's the foundation to the idea of trading. I give you what you don't have, you give me what you don't have, we use it to develop ourselves. Understanding that aspect, that just eliminating social inequalities and ensuring that we are at par, we acknowledge that these issues are issues that concerns you, that concerns me, and not just by my country's interest, or it regards to if I'm not benefiting something from this, I don't have anything to do with this. And we'll also see that in looking at the Paris Agreement, we see a section where it says that developed countries are supposed to help developing countries, although if leaderships were put in the right position, if our leadership structures or governance structures and policy-making structures were the right follow many of the right structures and approaches, it also in terms of inclusion, community inclusion, youth inclusion, like the previous speakers have said, it will help enhance how our policy formulation processes are being made and are being implemented to help aid many of the issues, climate crisis issues that we're facing down from grassroots level, which are the majority and are the urban poor. So I would say that Africa has a huge role to play. Africa can meet up the challenge if the issue of leadership, if the issue of investment and funding in the right structures, in the right initiatives, in the right programs are being pumped into, then we'll be able to optimize our place in terms of scaling climate action. And this doesn't undermine the other initiatives that are in helping to reduce carbon, helping to reforest, helping agroecology, helping small-scale farmers, and the likes. So I think that I'd like to stop here.
Thank you so much. I also hear in your talk the topic about leadership is coming so much. And I would like, maybe we need another session of it, of how do we take the power back as us people who put those people in power, in those leadership positions, to be able to have a role of influencing them. Are we maybe not as individual or society not united in understanding our environmental issues, and how do we rise then to ensure that those that, because they are in power because of us, so they should be reflecting. It can't be that we are speaking of Africa acknowledging the resources and owning that we have such resources, but they, as the people who are taking those decisions, that seems to be like a lack of reflection of that. So, but I'm gonna, before we open the discussion, we're gonna open the discussion if there's anything else that you picked up and anything that you want to add from the other speaker. But before I do that, I see Dr. Shadrack, the network seems to be more stable. So maybe if you could give us a summary of, because I know you were not done, give us a summary of where you were with your talk. The last that I picked up was around providing electricity to people, but in a lower price to be made affordable. So if you could just take us from there and then give us a summary, and then we come back and we just do a discussion, and then we take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think let me just emphasize the role of the state, because those who are our leaders, they need first to understand the situation. They also need to understand what is the crisis ahead. And not only that, they also need to get involved themselves, but they also have to make the policies that help people to work together to do what they can.
We've lost you again. We've lost you again.
Involved in.
You are back again.
Yeah.
You are back again. I can hear you.
Okay,
yeah.
So we are.
Oh no. Unfortunately, it seems like again.
I think we can continue because I think there's some network issue at Shadrack's end. We can proceed.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Kevin, coming back to you. Okay, we are the leaders of tomorrow. We are the exciting youth that's going to be leading Africa, and I'm so glad we are at a position where we interlinking before we even get to those. Because we're already in leadership, but like maybe we could say in our local or national area, we are not yet in the continental position. So, but we will get there because we are the incoming. So, where is our youth in terms of understanding, environmental issues, but linking it more into climate change? The majority of them, as we speak of them, is it like what's the thinking? Because I know from my experience, the youth is definitely disconnected beyond those who just, focus on learning more about the environment.
Yeah, so definitely we are the youth of today, we are the leaders of today and tomorrow. And yes, there is a big gap between climate action and where the population of the youth are. I can say that historically, young people, especially in Africa, have been at a disadvantaged position in both policy making and implementation of frameworks that concern climate change. And so it's when we are waking up to the reality that actually most of the young people, despite being the majority of the population, are not into the climate space. And so we need to make our education system and our work system more climate friendly. We need to make a climate education, for example, accessible or mandatory at all levels of education, so that when a kid grows up, they already know that this is the continent I live in, this is the climate stakes that we have, and this is what I can do. So from a very tender age, and before we even institutionalize that, we can take action even as individuals to nurture these young people, to nurture the next generation, to build their capacity, understand the role that they can play to curb the climate crisis. But on the flip side as well, I think the young people who are in the climate change, the few who are in the climate change space, or the climate space as they call it, are actually doing wonderfully well. Because apart from just the conventional, tree growing, cleanups, and all this, young people are also doing some very innovative stuff. Young people are developing apps, they are doing podcasts, they are doing storytelling, films, they're doing all sorts of innovative things that are either creating awareness to the other audience which has no connection with climate, or just creating the direct impact on the ground. You see environmental movements are coming up, networks are coming up, organizations that are youth-centered and youth-focused are coming up, youth-led organizations across Africa coming up. So it means that young people are appreciating the fact that you cannot solve the climate crisis alone. You need a movement. And for that movement to be created, we need very many young people to come together. What we need to do is now to bring those movements together again, de-silo the movements, so that all the young people are collectively pushing for regional change, systemic change. They're pushing for policies, they're pushing for ideas and resources that support those ideas, so that we move together, we move ahead together. So it's two-way. One way is holding those who are not yet part of the climate movement, and two is to appreciate that there is work that's already been done. We need to amplify it, and we need to vote for that and bring this work to the knowledge of the leaders who are there today, who are mostly our senior people. But most importantly, we also need to start valuing intergenerational dialogues, because most of the time we talk to ourselves as young people, and the senior citizens talk to themselves as senior people. So now we need to bridge that gap. Let's start having rooms that have both generations together. Rooms where the young people show their priorities, and the old people also, the senior people also share the priorities. Because they are the people who have, I can say, the knowledge, when it comes to the best researchers, people who have been working on these things for a while. And then there are the early career people like myself who wants to be nurtured. So how do we then bridge the gap between the senior people and the young people so that we mark these priorities? And this goes beyond just talks, but also practically, how do we influence national priorities? Because here in Kenya, for example, the country is now preparing for, engagement. The country is now preparing for engagement in the climate COP. And so, as every other country in the world, they're preparing their national position that they will carry to the climate COP. Now, what needs to be done, because they do consultations amongst themselves, they need to also include young people. Hey, youth, what are your climate priorities? And so that we have an opportunity where the national priorities of the national position reflects the interests of young people. For that to happen, young people must have already brought themselves together, they've done their own consultations, and they have their own youth position. Then the youth position feeds into the national position. So these dialogues can be turned into avenues through which even the national priorities are shaped collectively by the senior citizens and the youth. So that youth are not just engaged later stage, but even in the development of this. So that when we now move beyond the COP and now start implementing what we agreed, youth can appreciate that, oh, this is a process that we are actually engaged in. And so we are comfortable being part of the implementation, monitoring, and all that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I please involve me in that movement, in any youth movement from South Africa. You have me to be involved. Abimbola, you spoke. I'm gonna go to Dr. Shadrack. I want you to think around this. You spoke about the trade where one African country can give you what they have and the other to make it work, so that we address the issues that we have. So I believe it's called something about, it used to be a better system of some sort during the old days. So I want to just maybe share what, give me how we could do this, how it could work, how we could interlink. But while I have Dr. Shadrack, because I know that your network is stable, let me go to him to maybe just give me a summary and just sum it up, with also including what you've heard from other speakers, and just give me your last word, because we don't have much time, because we also need to go to questions. So just please give me your summary, Dr. Shadrack, and then I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah, I think one thing is all have to get involved and do their roles. I know there is a part that the private sector has to do, the government has to do, all people, all of us have to do. We all have to be involved in order to resolve the issue and to avoid the crisis ahead. I know, for example, in the manufacturing industry, from now on, I think we have to put more emphasis in industries that likely to use the green energy rather than using the coal or other petroleum products. But also we also have to be involved to make sure that the vegetation that exists in Africa, we all have to work together to make sure that it continues to be there, because that will help us to continue to have the rains, even if we do not resolve easily the carbon dioxide issue. If the greenhouse gases continues to be a problem beyond 2050, it will be a challenge. But if we have our forest intact, that will be good. So we also have to make sure that we emphasize on the using clean energy cooking stuff, because we know there are many trees that are going towards that way. But we also know that we have the agriculture which is also taking away trees. So we have to make sure that agroforestry is more emphasized. We also have to make sure that our riverine ecosystems are well protected, because now as water is getting scarce, people think farming in the riverine ecosystem is a solution, but that is also drying up rivers. So I think collaboration, and also one other thing is to make sure that people understand the crisis. There are many people, even as we speak, who do not know if there is a problem. They see the challenge, but they don't understand what is happening. But we have to make sure that our communities understand the challenge, and they also get educated about what they can do, so that every person can do something and everybody can play a role. I'm glad we touched the issue of involving the young people. And we know that every person can make a difference. That's the jargon we use in Roots and Shoots, part of the Jane Goodall Institute. And it's true, we have seen the young people who have been involved in tree planting, in spreading the word around, as other people mentioned. And those have to be emphasized so that we can reach more people. With the growing population, we also have to make sure that all individuals, they do something, even if making the tree planting a must thing for every family, every individual, that will save Africa from the current deforestation rate and desertification threat. Anyway, I think I can end there. I know we have had many. Thank you for involving me as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I picked up the need for everyone to care, like the need for everyone to be involved, so that, you know, it's driven, you know, from the society up. Coming back to you, I want you to teach me this thing. Abimbola. Abimbola. Yeah?
Yes.
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 Okay, a brief summary of the discussion, and I was interested, you know, how you pointed to the trade, the barter system. So maybe if you could also enlighten us more about that, and then just like wrap it up, I would appreciate that.
Okay, so like I spoke about the exchange of resources, because it's through the exchange of resources that we can achieve development, because we do not have it all, even if we have a huge natural resource. And that's why we trade with other countries or continents to ensure that we get what we need to help make our lives smarter, easier, and through a collective means. So what I mean by the barter mechanism, you would understand that pre-industrial stage, when we have to trade amongst ourselves. Taking Nigeria, for instance, I am from a particular ethnic group called the Yorubas. And so there is this thing that we do. If I have slippers and I need your bag, I give you my slippers in place of your bag. Before we started producing Naira notes, money to buy services, to conduct in services. And so this is the same thing that applies to nations of the world. For instance, let's talk about the EU Green Deal, where due to the war currently in Ukraine, they can't get oil. They come to the African continent to get fossils, oil and gas. So these are the kind of partnership that I'm talking about. And so in terms of leadership, leadership is crossing, because I always use the bottom-up approach, because I believe that every leader started from a community, and the community of people are bound by their cultures, their values, maybe religion, and other things that define the way they think, the way they make decisions, and the way they conduct their daily activities. So in terms of leadership, collaboration and partnership is huge. It goes past, or is more crucial than money and investments, because if you have money, if you have investments, and there's no collaboration and partnership, it's as well as you pumping your resources into something that will bring no return. So in terms of collaboration and partnership, I think that the African leaders need to do more in terms of sustaining such partnerships, in terms of sustaining collaborations to help curb the impact of the climate crisis, because we can only look within and not be vulnerable or dependent on other developed countries. Because if you take a look at the Green Climate Fund, well, many developed countries have made ambitious commitments to fund the African mitigation and adaptation method to help achieve the Paris Agreement. However, only 9.7 billion has been remitted into the fund. What of others who have made such commitments? And you see that compared to the issues that we face on the African continent, the money is not enough to even mitigate. And so for me, I would like to say partnership in terms of the African leaders, as well as investing so much in adaptation methods, because I am a believer that there are some things in terms of climate action, in terms of the climate change that cannot work for the African continent for now, by virtue of the issue of power, by virtue of good road networks, by virtue of some developed infrastructures and technologies that are heavily backed by fundings, which the African continent might likely not be able to afford. And so adaptation is another alternative measure that I so much believe in, because how do we ensure we are able to live with the stress and shocks of the impact of climate change, to which we contribute lesser to. And so adaptation is a huge method to which we can use to build more resilience for the African countries. And I deal with coastal communities, and in my research and in going to and conversing with such communities, I've been able to understand that there are a lot of practices that are valuable to help not just conservation methods, but also help to scale climate resilience at community level to help the African region as a whole. And I would like to give instance to one. So for instance, let's say there's supposed to be a disaster and there are no disaster response mechanisms. But then these local communities, particularly for those who are herders, they have these behaviors amongst the animals that they rear. And they keep having this particular response that something is coming. And because they are locals and they understand the workings of their environment, they're able to detect that, okay, something is about to happen, even if they are not able to put a name to it. So some of these mechanisms, some of these approaches are something that we can incorporate to help improve data responses, and backed by technology, I think we can go a long way in terms of improving our efforts, in terms of scaling our efforts, and in terms of our partnerships as a continent, and not seeing ourselves as competitors, because with that, we can't scale further in terms of climate resilience.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I don't think I need to comment further on that. Do we have any questions? Do you have any questions?
Yes, we do have. There's a question for Kevin. Somebody's asked, do you think the African Union can play a crucial role in making sure that there is creation of laws regarding climate change, and that they are implemented in each country and not just one country having their own laws, and in turn having plastic from another country washing up on the beach of a neighboring country? This is a question for Kevin.
Oh yeah, I think the AU has a big role to play, not just in formulating such laws, but also implementing them. We understand that there's the African Union Agenda 263, and it actually highlights some of these things, like having a greener continent and all this. And so the problem that I have seen here in Africa is actually not in the constitution of laws. We have many countries that have wonderful laws, but I think the breakdown is always on the implementation aspect of it. So even if I ask someone today, like, where are we in terms of like the implementation or where are we on the roadmap to Agenda 2063, you realize that it's not really quantifiable. We really don't know if we're getting there and by how much, like what are the strides and what still needs to be done. So in terms of constitutional laws, of course, they're made by countries and the AU has just to adopt them. But as a body that represents the region, obviously they have a bigger power in terms of like bargaining on what's good for Africa, in terms of presenting the priorities of Africa, not just to the continent itself, but to the outer world, for example, and most importantly, getting these things implemented on the ground. So if we can have some legally binding agreements, for example, on plastic pollution, or some legally binding agreements on increasing of acreage under forests, or the minimum acceptable forest cover for each country, which is something that's not there, then we can start moving forward. For example, as a region, if we can agree that the minimum acceptable forest cover for each country is 10%, it means that every country will have to work within its capacity to increase its forested areas to that minimum amount, and of course, move beyond that. So yes, first of all, I agree that the EU is a great body to oversee the enactment and implementation of these things, but they have to be legally binding. Just having them on paper and saying, okay, now we have a continental law on marine pollution will not really help much, as it has been the case with the 2063 agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have one more question, and I think this is for all four of y'all. Climate change is a problem that is being acknowledged by many people, particularly youth. But there is still a large number of people who do not know what they are experiencing is climate change and have no knowledge on how actively to play a role in fighting climate change. Considering the size of Africa, the issues of internet and population of people without access to technology, how do you think such knowledge can reach communities that does not involve waiting for funding from external donors? An interesting question. Maybe Shadrack can go first.
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe there are more things that we can do without using the donor funding. The issue is how can we pass the message around? I know if we expect internet and Facebook and other like phones, the message doesn't go that faster. But I feel like
I think there's some network issue. We can't hear Shadrack. Nonhle, maybe you'd like to answer now? Nonhle, would you like to take the question? Shadrack, I think Shadrack is here. Sorry, could you please continue? Shadrack, could you please continue? You're on mute. You're on mute. I'm just requesting, yeah, okay. Shadrack, you were saying.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think we can use all the possible opportunities. We can use our schools. We can use our leadership in villages to pass the news around about this issue. I know many are not informed, but I believe the government can find the mechanism to ensure that in every village, there is a team that can pass a word around about the challenge and how we can all get involved.
Nonhle, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, I think maybe also going back to just being intentional about it. I love how, for me, going back to the roots, going back to the communities, them being more aware of it and owning the issue and understanding and appreciating it. So as Mr. Shadrack has said, finding influential people in the community, targeting the youth, most importantly, because we can't get to a position where we are losing the youth to not care, about environmental issue, in this instance, the climate change issues. So even for me, and it's not that I'm losing faith on the government or the leaders, but I just now am in a position where I want us now who are empowered now to go back and empower others to be in the same position, and to strive in their daily lives to contribute towards preventing climate change, because it will come back and affect us. All those that we are trying, who are important, should be driving. I'm not discrediting the government or the people in leadership, now they should be left, because we now have a voice, we now have a platform to speak, should be left. They should do their work. But as we are such influential people, and we should be driving. Like, for instance, when I go home in my rural area, now I should be the one who's be able to spread the word, and everyone should be able to know about ways of preventing climate change, or how you can contribute because of my voice. So that initiative, and those who are empowered already, to go on and empower others. And unfortunately, I am now having to run to another session. So if Sabika, you could please continue on my behalf and round it off.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the speakers. You were great, and I hope that we meet again along the lines. I am available to participate and to be part of any programs that's meant to bring Africa to come together and be a better continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much, all of you all, for being here. And I think it's very important and essential for us to, there's so much to take away from this conversation, especially the fact that with the upcoming COP27, which is in Africa, the world is looking at solutions for Africa and from Africa. And that's basically what we wanted to convey through this chat. Even though the carbon emissions are so, have been negligible coming from the entire continent, it's so important for this continent to contribute to preventing climate crisis. And so thank you, Shadrack, thank you, Nonhle. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'll just move on now to towards part of our